Hello, everybody. This is Howie Hawkins. I'm running for the Green Party nomination for president, and we're here to answer your questions. I just want to mention a statement we put out today. There's a lot of nonsense out there. The right-wing reopen demonstrations, Trump and a bunch of these governors, and then a bunch of crazy ideas across the spectrum of conspiracy-minded people about how the coronavirus is a hoax or it's exaggerated, so some elites can make money off vaccines or 5G or stuff like that. So we put out a statement, Angela Walker, my running mate, and I, just saying we want to follow the science-based public health advice. We want a robust federal program for testing, contact tracing, and isolating those infected. And we want safety protections for workers going back. And we want that before we open up this economy, because all the indications from the public health people is people go out there without those protections and without the ability to test and then trace those who are infected and isolate them. We're going to have more infections and more deaths, and that's just inexcusable. So that statement was sent out today. It'll be on my website if it's not up already, and take a look. Today, Pelosi put forward her package. I haven't had a chance to look at the details. Somebody sent me a summary. Sounds like they're hitting on some points, but not all of them. So we got to stay on top of that. And now's the time. I mean, this coronavirus depression we're plunging into, a lot of small businesses are already out of business, and there are a lot of jobs there. And investors are going to be reluctant to invest with all the uncertainty and create jobs. And consumers are going to hold on to the money they got because they don't know what's coming next. So it's all the conditions for a prolonged stagnation at the least and depression at the worst. So that's where the eco-socialist Green New Deal comes in. Massive public investment to rebuild our economy for 100% clean energy and zero to negative carbon emissions, which we need to do anyway. So with that, I'd like to take people's questions, which should show up on my, oh, there's one. Will I be able to vote green in Illinois this November? Yes. The Green Party of Illinois asked the government for relief from physical petitioning because it's unreasonable given the social distancing and trying to stop the spread of the coronavirus. And the government said no. So we sued the bastards and we won about 10 days ago. So the judge put us on the ballot. So the green ticket will be on the ballot in Illinois, not just for president, but for our congressional candidates. So that's what we're trying to do in all the remaining about 25 states where we still have to get ballot access. And I know what's happening in some of the states. There are a lot of them, and somebody else is focused on that, but I may be able to answer your question, depends on the state. Next question. What steps would you take to make it easier to vote for young people? Well, I would say we should have mandatory voter registration. It should be the government's responsibility to make sure everybody who comes of age is registered to vote. And then everybody should be sent a ballot that they can mail back in, particularly this year. And I expect we'll still have this pandemic afflicting us. People will be reluctant to go to polling places. And it's really in the next few weeks that we've got to get the funding. It's about $4 billion is what they're estimating to the states so they can set up, the printing, the mailing, and the staff they need to count on election day and the week after. So that needs to be put in place now. Now, for young people, I think there's voter ID problems for a lot of young people, and it varies from state to state. I mean, in some locations, if you're going to college, the local government doesn't want you to register to vote in that community. So then you got to be registered in your hometown, and you might get questioned about your residency, and you got to get an absentee ballot. And so there are just a lot more hurdles. And then there's the ID problem. Young people may not have a driver's license, but they have a student ID. But in Texas, for example, they won't recognize your student ID as legitimate ID to go vote. That's the problem. In Texas, if you got a gun permit and bring it in, they'll let you vote. So there's a lot of work that has to be done to make sure there are not extra obstacles for young people to vote. So my running mate is coming on here in a second. Angela Walker. There she is. She didn't expect me to be on because I thought I had another event, but I'm so busy, I actually put in the wrong day. It's tomorrow night. So here I am. How you doing?
I am good. I have been sitting in this StreamYard for the last few minutes because I'm expecting it to do like Zoom, where just like, okay, the host lets you in, and didn't see the blue tab on the bottom that said enter the broadcast studio. So there's that.
Well, you just came off a day driving trucks and you look better than me. I look like I'm at work with my t-shirt on, but
Oh, trust me, I polished myself up before I got here.
okay,
I'm
good.
ready for human consumption.
All right. So here's a question. What is your stance on money in politics? What would you would you put blockades to prevent super PACs and the like? You ready to answer a question, Angela? Or you want me to jump on that one?
You can. I mean, I chime in at the top because someone just asked me that question like a couple of days ago. But yeah, have at it.
Well, my stance is that there shouldn't be private money in politics. Elections are a public function, should be paid for by the public. There's been since the 90s a proposal called the clean money model, where in the case of every federal candidate who qualified would get an equal grant. So it'd be a level playing field in that respect. They'd also have equal access to broadcast media, which the federal government can insist upon because these broadcasters are federally licensed. So that would be the answer. And the question disappeared, but the other part of it was about super PACs. And if we're doing all public money, super PACs would not be legal, really. But I would add that the problem now with all these court decisions saying money is speech, when in fact money is property, that you not only have super PACs, but super PACs can get dark money. And then you don't know where that money originally came from. So it's really not clear where a lot of this money is going. And of course, super PACs are supposed to be independent of the campaigns, which have their own financial reports they give to the Federal Election Commission. But everybody knows, that's a wink and a nod because the people that form those super PACs come out of the staffs of these candidates' campaigns. So, that's got to stop. We don't need the best politicians money can buy. We need the best politicians that the people want. You want to add to that, Angela?
That's my friend that just popped up. That's my friend Alan.
Okay, then you
hey, Alan. Hug Shannon. What are your plans for people currently incarcerated and confined across the United States who are suffering from a lack of testing, a lack of ability to social distance, and whom are getting infected at an alarming rate, oftentimes higher than outside? I mean, I think, unless you'd like to speak to that first, Howie.
No, you go ahead. I'll add anything if I need to.
I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that, like, just like with nursing homes, with assisted care facilities where people's mobility is limited, they are not able to be socially distant. They don't have, particularly in prisons, they don't have access to water the way that they need to. Some of the things that I'm hearing coming out of, from people who are incarcerated are talking about there's no PPE whatsoever. So, I mean, down to basic soap and water. So my thing is people who are, and I've seen it trickling, it isn't happening, I don't think, in the way that it needs to, but people who are incarcerated for nonviolent offenses, let them out. And folks who are elders, who are not a danger to themselves, who are not a danger to society, let them go. And also put things in place in prisons and correctional facilities. That's that we're not gonna get into that. They should have basic needs. They should have running water. There should be the ability for people who are incarcerated to be socially distant. You don't Just because people are incarcerated does not mean they're disposable. And we need to be cognizant of the fact that because of their close proximity to one another, and the fact that to a large degree they're not a population that the public feels compelled to think about or consider, they still need care. They still need access to things that will keep them safe from this virus.
Yeah, I would just add, I've heard, believe it was the district attorney in Philadelphia said he thought 75% of the people in the jails and prisons could be released in this pandemic. They're not a threat to public safety. You mentioned people near the end of their sentence or who are elderly or nonviolent offenders. There are also people awaiting trial for nonviolent offenses, a lot of them for petty violations of their conditions of parole or probation, and they get sent back into the joint. And those people need to be released so we can do social distancing of those people we got to keep in prison. And then we need to provide supports for these people when they come out. In addition, we got thousands of migrants in detention camps. And we've got more migrants camped out on the border on the Mexican side because we won't let them in to be processed. Those people should be let in. The people in the detention camps should be let go. And we should make sure that, particularly for unaccompanied minors, we find safe housing for them and the social supports they need to get integrated into society. And, you know, if they're going through the asylum or immigration process, you know, they're safe while that happens. But, you know, our policy is we should have open borders. Should be like within the European Union. People should be able to cross back and forth across the borders in North America for jobs, shopping, recreation, or residence. And then the answer, people say, well, everybody gonna move here. No, I don't think so. Greece is on its back. It's been, you know, in trouble since the Great Recession. But not all the Greeks are moving to Germany or one of the richer European countries. Some of their family members may go up there and get a job and send remittances back, which a lot of people do from Central America and Mexico. So, you know, the border, I would add, you know, it divides working people because you can't organize across the borders, but those low wages on the other side of the border are used as a club against workers here because bosses will say, if you don't do what we say, we'll just move to Mexico where they're cheaper. So we got to get rid of that border and let people organize across the borders. Well, I reviewed the statement we put out today, Angela. You want to take a first crack at that?
Mandatory vaccinations. And I'm thinking, are you asking about babies or are you asking about what's coming with this, with COVID? Do we? I know with COVID, the statement that we made today is the fact that this party and this campaign support the prevailing medical knowledge being offered to us now, safety measures that we are being given, and that we, you know, follow the social distancing, follow the facial coverings, follow the hand washing, the things that we're being told to do. So Howie, I'm not.
Well, I'll give you.
I think, is it around COVID or no?
Yeah, well, I'm for vaccinations. I think it's a good public health thing as long as they're properly vetted. We had a problem with the swine flu vaccination back in the 70s that they rushed out under the Ford administration, and some people got very sick from that. But vaccinations are good for public health. Now, to have the state require it, that gets into people's privacy. I have a problem with that. And I think what we got to do is educate people on, you know, why they should get vaccinations. And there'll be a small minority that don't want it, but if enough people are vaccinated, then these viruses and other diseases cannot take hold. So I'm reluctant to have the state require vaccinations. That's an easy question. Us.
Thank you.
You know, Vermin Supreme is a character. He's got his little shtick, but I think people want a serious alternative that's building a real alternative party on the left for working people, people of color, the youth that are voting in low numbers. And that requires organizing. And I think he's got a nice performance, but it's not what we're doing. Well, this is directed to me. How are we going to protect it? We got to raise our voices. We got to demonstrate. And we got to get a big green vote and then use that leverage going forward. This administration doesn't care about the Endangered Species Act, and the Democrats haven't made it a priority. You know, they basically say McConnell won't let us do it. But we have times in history when people stood up and made them do it. You know, who thought Nixon would end the war in Vietnam when his actual secret plan was to nuke North Vietnam to end the war? And we had massive demonstrations in the fall of '69, and it scared the hell out of Nixon and Kissinger. Nixon decided he couldn't get reelected if he went ahead with his plan. And then Reagan, we overrode his veto of sanctions against South Africa. Congress did that because Congress knew what the people wanted, and we had stood up and, you know, lots of demonstrations. So it's really, you ask me what I'm going to do, I think it's something we all got to do. And we'll, you know, talk about that during the campaign. But it's something that requires, like the campaign does, it's got to be a movement. It just can't be Angela and I, you know, talking online. It's got to be everybody lending their voice.
And I'll interject. I mean, I really think that that also reflects back to, you know, something that we believe in, is that the mistreatment of human beings and animals is intricately linked to the mistreatment of the planet. And so if we are okay with, if we're not fighting to keep species and species diversity happening, things like that, it's kind of our responsibility to do it. And if we are people that say we care about the environment, then I think that it's incumbent on us to do it. So we need your help, basically.
What are your policies on South and Central America? Will you call a summit of South and American leaders? I think they meant North American leaders. Well, you know, our policies is the U.S. should get out of the regime change business and let countries determine who their leaders are. And yeah, we need a summit of all the leaders of all the Americas to establish better relationships. I mean, the U.S. has backed a coup in Honduras, flew the president who raised the minimum wage out of the country in his pajamas. That was the military of Honduras, but that's a subsidiary of the U.S. military. They're all trained at the School of the Americas. Same thing we did to Aristide in Haiti, flew him out of the country to Africa in his pajamas in another coup. This Bolivian coup, this attempted coup against Venezuela last week. All that's got to stop. So you want to add anything, Angela?
And I think the summit between South and North American leaders with North American leaders under new leadership in this country would go very far towards working to reestablish trust, because let's face it, with all of the meddling, for lack of a better term, that the United States has done in Central and South America, we've got a lot of amends to make. So I think that, you know, that summit would be the first step toward, you know, the first piece in a whole lot of things that we will be doing, because we have a lot of debts to pay down there.
Hey there, how are you all? Would you be able to speak more about your positions on nuclear? I'm gonna take that one because I'm a anti-nuclear activist going back to when we organized the Clamshell Alliance in 1976, and then we had the big occupation in '77. 1,414 of us arrested, put in National Guard armories for 10 days. It was all over the media, and the anti-nuclear movement exploded across the country. And then from there, it led into the anti-nuclear weapons movement in the '80s, where we pushed hard for a nuclear freeze to stop the arms race. And some of us were pushing for disarmament, which we got by the end of the '80s when Reagan and Gorbachev really reduced the strategic arms and some of the tactical nukes. So my position is nuclear power. We need to phase it out. We need to make sure the decommissioning is funded and done properly. The companies that got into that industry, they're going to go bankrupt doing that, but that's what they should do. They got into it. You take the risk. Under capitalism, you get the reward or you lose. But the federal government has subsidized, and it's been one of the most unsuccessful industries ever, the Price-Anderson Act, because the insurance companies won't insure them. And some people say that we should go nuclear because it's carbon free. It's actually not if you go through the whole production chain and the fact that there are fossil fuel generators backing up at the nuclear site when it goes down. So it's not really carbon free, although it doesn't have as big a carbon footprint once it's up and running. But to build more nuclear power plants, for the same money, we could get more power from solar and wind installations. So it's a diversion. It's a waste of money. And you said nuclear, that brings up nuclear weapons. And one of the things we want to do in this campaign is put the question of the nuclear arms race on the national agenda, because we're at death's doorstep. The bulletin and the nuclear atomic scientists move their doomsday clock closer to midnight than it's ever been, because we're in a new nuclear arms race. The strategic nukes are now 6 times faster than they were before. It's no longer launch on warning, it's launch in anticipation the other side might launch. And we're putting tactical nukes into conventional forces with the insane idea that you can escalate to de-escalate. That's what the doctrine is called. The US has it, now Russia has it. And the stupid idea is, if you're losing a conventional war, you use some tactical nukes and then you de-escalate. But as Daniel Ellsberg told us in his last book, and he was a nuclear war planner before he was a Vietnam war planner, this thing is automated. Once the nukes start flying, they're all going to fly, and that's the end of us. So we need nuclear disarmament initiatives, a pledge of no first use, disarm to a minimum credible deterrent, cut our military budget 75%, stop these 7 endless wars, begin withdrawing our forces from these over 800 foreign military bases, and on the basis of those tension-reducing initiatives, go to the other nuclear powers and say, we want completed nuclear disarmament. And we'll have 122 nations with us, non-nuclear nations, that in July 2017 agreed to the text of a new treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons. And the international campaign for the abolition of nuclear weapons got the Nobel Peace Prize for that. And hardly anybody in this country knows that, because our media don't talk about it and none of the presidential candidates do. But this is one thing, if the Greens do nothing else, is to force this issue on the debate, onto the stage, the national stage, and get it debated. Because, like I said, we're on death's doorstep with this new nuclear arms race. And with crazy people like Donald Trump, or hawks like Joe Biden, who may inadvertently get in a situation where the nukes start flying, we got to do something about that. So, yeah, I got a lot to say about nuclear. You want to add anything, Angela?
I mean, for me, it's just personal. I have 5 grandkids. I need them, to be able to grow up, and I need them to grow up in a world that's clean. I mean, as far as I know, Fukushima is still leaking and leaking radiation into the Pacific Ocean. And then I think back, I'm old enough to remember Chernobyl. So this is for me, it's very clear this is not a path that we need to continue if we're serious about life on this planet.
Hello, what do you think of a shorter work week to reduce carbon emissions? We've seen CO2 drop drastically since the lockdown began. Thanks. You want to start with that one, Angela?
That just really excited me. It's like, why is that? And one of the things, and I've been raring to say it, one of the things that because I drive for a living, which y'all know, one of the things that has been absolute paradise for us who have to be out and because we're working, driving, is the lack of traffic, the lack of other people on the road doing things. And also just thinking about the fact that while human beings have had to be inside or, not interacting with the world in the way that they normally do, watching nature bounce back in so many ways. Animals returning to places that they had not been able to go because human beings take up all the space from them. And so I'm hoping that working from home, reconsidering what our work weeks look like, reconsidering what it means to have to travel, have to commute. I'm hoping those things are things that people are thinking about, because I don't want to see people do without economically, and there's a plan for that. But also, I would like to find that balance between human beings, folks getting what they need, but also making space for nature to replenish in the way that it's doing.
Yeah, I would say what we should be looking toward is reducing work hours without reducing pay.
Yes.
Because we're so productive now that we can reduce the work hours. And what got me into the Green Party in the end was I saw in the first economic program written by the ecological socialists in Hamburg, Germany, that what we're looking for is a fair distribution of work and income, so that some people aren't, working 40 hours and making lots of money, and other people are unemployed, but that everybody can be employed and we all work less. But to make sure that everybody is not, taking a cut in pay, one of two things have to happen. We either have to have a socialist society where everybody gets paid according to work and there's not capital income and everybody gets paid enough. And if you want more income, you work more. But that's going to be a while. So the other thing we need is a way of sort of a second paycheck, a social dividend, so that productivity increases are collected through the tax system and given to everybody, so that tops off their pay. And there have been proposals for that, been around for about 30 years. Andre Gortz has written a lot about that. And the other thing I would say about how that affects CO2, Barry Commoner, one of the most prominent environmental scientists we had in the 20th century, his last book, maybe it was one of his books, I think it might have been his last book, Making Peace with the Planet. He made the point that we got to address the point of production. We can't solve the environmental problem just by consuming less or consuming differently, because the technologies we're using are what are producing the carbon. And because you don't have public transit, you need a car to get to work, and so you drive a car and use carbon. So we need to change our production system so that they are carbon free, and that's where the real progress can be made in reducing CO2 emissions. And our eco-socialist Green New Deal is about transforming all the technologies that use carbon so they're carbon free. Can you comment on the importance of an independent left party outside of electoral politics? Well, I got an ebook out about that, but Angela, you've done that, as a candidate for sheriff, as a candidate for vice president, and so why don't you talk about your thoughts on that question?
The first thing I thought about when I saw this was this question is that somebody made a couple years ago a really ugly comment about leftist politics being performance art. And I just found that really insulting, because the thing is, these two parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, they need to be challenged. They need to be challenged. They need to be called on the fact that they spout the rhetoric that they give people may be different, but when you look at the aims that they both have, one may come at it a little bit more harsh than the other one, but ultimately both of their goal is to serve capitalism, and they do not do anything that challenges the capitalist system. They're not going to do that. And so if you are someone who genuinely believes that we need to be putting the needs of life, the needs of human beings, the needs of the planet over making money, then you have to find another way out. I mean, we're watching it play out now. Look at all these folks that really love the things that Bernie Sanders had to say and really love the things that he stood for. And for me personally, to turn around and watch him endorse someone who is absolutely not going to further anything that he stood for, does not care about anything that he stood for. I mean, not only is it it wasn't just hurtful, it was enough to make you angry. And so I believe that, you know, left parties outside of independent left parties working outside the two-party system are absolutely essential, especially now, because if you have things that you're concerned about, things that you care about, neither of these two parties are going to push your issues far enough to where it does you any good. If it comes up against challenging this capitalist system that we live under, they're not going to do it. They'll give you lip service. They'll give you half measures. That's the things we've been seeing all along, which is why there's so much dissatisfaction with the Democratic Party. But at the end of the day, they're not going to serve you in the way that you need to be served. You need the left parties.
Yeah, if you're a progressive or a socialist and you vote for the Democrats, you get lost in the sauce because they don't know you're a socialist or a progressive. You voted for Biden, and Biden is opposed to what you want. You get taken for granted. They think they got you in their hip pocket. They don't have to pay attention to you. So you got to vote for what you want or you'll never get it. And even the people that are progressives and stay in the Democratic Party, they need us on the outside. We give them leverage because if we're winning votes, they can tell the people they're negotiating with in their own party, hey, we better move that way or we're going to lose. We're not just going to lose votes. We're going to start losing seats to these people. So we got leverage. I always give this example. I got 5% of the vote running for governor in 2014. Andrew Cuomo wanted to run up the vote to get more than his father ever got when he was governor, Mario Cuomo, more than he got in 2010 when he was first elected. He wanted to get ready to run for president. And he got less than he got in 2010 and his father got. And he looked over and here was little old me with 5% of the vote in New York State. And he had to look at what we were saying. And in the course of the next year, he adopted 3 things that we were demanding that he had never supported. A ban on fracking, a $15 minimum wage, and paid family leave. So anybody that says parties on the left, third parties don't have influence, if you look at the history of this country, going back to the first workers' party in the world, the Working Men's Party in Philly and in New York in 1829 and 30, the Liberty Party that put the slavery issue on the agenda, the People's Party, the Greenback Labor Party, the Populist Movement, the Socialist Party, they set the agenda. They may not have taken power, although in the case of Liberty, it evolved into the Republican Party through the Free Soil Party and did take power. But they set the agenda, and everybody was talking about the issues they were raising. And we did get some reforms, like the social insurance programs of the New Deal. They were programs from the Socialist Party. Of course, that doesn't satisfy us. As Norman Thomas said in a speech, and he said, Roosevelt had said to him, well, what do you think? We carried out your program. And Norman Thomas replied, yeah, you carried it out on a stretcher. In other words, you took a few little pieces, but you didn't get the whole thing. So, yeah, left parties are so important. And if we don't have one, everything's going to keep moving to the right, like the Democrats have for the last 50 years. So the next question, how would you convey to people that think that what happens to people of color, poor, and other vulnerable communities doesn't affect them?
Ooh.
Ready for that one?
You want to take that one first? Because I could.
Well, go ahead then. I'll add on if I need to.
My thing is, if in this day and age, you do not think, how do I want to put this? We had an opportunity as a country during Reconstruction, after the period of African enslavement, to decide which way this country was going to go. People had the opportunity to say, let's not leave anybody behind. Maybe you don't look like me. Maybe you don't have my background, but we are all devastated by the aftermath of this war. We are all in need of things. Why don't we get together? We had the opportunity to do that. That was not the road we took. This country chose to continue its abuse of African descendants. We had an opportunity with the New Deal in the 30s. After a world war, after, folks are the Great Depression, people are dealing with economic hardship again. There was an opportunity to say, how about we set aside our surface differences, our cultural differences, and let's all get together and work on this big thing that will advance all of us. That did not happen. It did not happen remotely in the way that it needed to happen. Some people benefited from things that happened, but for the most part, Black people specifically were left behind yet again. We have had opportunities to move forward as a country where we could have made amends for some of the abuses that had happened. We chose not to do that. And so now we're seeing suffering in this country behind the coronavirus pandemic, the likes of which a whole lot of people have never seen in their lives. I personally, I'm 46 years old. I agree that this is, and I've been here through, the AIDS epidemic, SARS #1, swine flu, all of those things. I've never seen anything like this. And I think that the culmination of that lack of willingness to do for everybody created austerity measures that led to the lack of infrastructure that we're seeing now. So now everybody is in pain, unless you're very, very wealthy. Most folks who may have never thought of themselves on a par with someone of color or somebody who, is a different class than them, or one of the things that's been said about this virus, this pandemic, is that it is a great equalizer. Now, we know in a whole lot of ways that's not true. But I think that the initial, what they were trying to say is that everybody is in pain. And so I think, again, we are in a position and at a point in the history of this country where we have an opportunity to decide, going forward, coming through this pandemic, are we actually going to make unity with one another? I don't have to like you. You don't have to be my best friend. We don't have to hold hands and sing Kumbaya. But are we willing to get together and work together for what is the common good? And so what I would say to people who don't think that people who are poor, people who are of color, people who are incarcerated, people who are in facilities for, elderly people, things like that, oh, well, that's not me, I don't need to worry about that. When they're done, when there's no more of us, who do you think it all falls on? I mean, your suffering is intricately linked to what is happening to all of these communities that you think you don't have to think anything about. So this is an opportunity, I think, for us to get it right. Coming through this pandemic and coming out of it. Who are we going to be? Are we going to be people that raise everybody else up and look and see ourselves in each other and what we need? Or are we going to continue in the way that we always have?
Yeah, the question left out a word. It said, how would you convey to people that think what happens to people of color, poor, and other vulnerable communities doesn't affect them? Well, those people are probably white middle-class people. And I would say you got to understand that the power structure wants you to think that, because then you're divided from people of color and other people that work for a living. And the truth is, in this country's history, the greater the degree of black-white inequality, the lower incomes white people had. When the poor whites were mobilized under the slogan of white supremacy, after the populist movement was defeated in the South, and they got the white supremacist governments, the all-white governments in the South, the poor white people got even poorer. And previous to that, they were aligned in the Farmers Alliances, a lot of them, in the populist movement, and they were advancing. So if you think you're not affected, you're in the same class. If you're a white worker, you're in the same class as a black worker. And if you're in the white middle class and the black middle class, there is discrimination. I mean, we got black people graduating from college now who are working low-wage jobs. But as they downsize, they can go after you just as well. So, of course, it affects you. And you just got to understand that, or I think you're being foolish. And so that's what I would add to that. Next question, and I'm gonna do this because I got an example from New York, and it's from somebody in New York. Isabella in Ossining, New York. I'm mostly concerned about your stance on gun control. How you address the concerns of those people who think gun control policies have consistently and disproportionately been applied to people of color, and that these policies have not actually stopped a significant amount of gun crime. And I know Sheriff Walker has something to say about that, but I'll just tell you, here in New York, we had the SAFE Act, and then you looked a couple years later at where it was enforced, and it was forced in Black urban communities. White rural communities, the sheriff said, we're not enforcing this. So it was disproportionately enforced. Now, my general position on gun control is people, if they're law-abiding, should, they have a right to their sidearms, their rifles, their shotguns. Military assault weapons, I think, should come off the street. We should buy them back. They can kill too many people too fast. And I had an M16 in the Marine Corps, and I don't want that out on the street because somebody who wants to do bad will really do bad. So that's my general position. We also need to close the loopholes. There should be background checks. There are a lot of reforms, but I agree with the basic framework of the Heller decision. People have a right to their firearms if they're law-abiding, but the public has a right to regulations in the interest of public safety. So I'll stop there and turn it over to Angela, who ran for sheriff of Milwaukee County.
I was just going to say, I concur with everything you just said. I think that in gun control issues, just like everything else in this country, it disproportionately falls badly on people of color. And yeah, what you just said, Howie.
Well, the last part about the gun control laws haven't actually stopped a significant amount of gun crime.
I'm trying to think of how to say this diplomatically. This country has a violence problem. Our problem is not necessarily weapons, although I am with you completely on the fact that I don't need an AK-47 for home protection for myself. I don't need that. And I am with you on the M16. I remember how to use those. We have a problem, a love affair with violence. I think our problem in this country with weapons goes deeper than the guns themselves. Like, those weapons are a tool. But I think that if we're going to look at what we're thinking about mass shootings, we're thinking about, the things that are the way things are being carried out around that, we need to question our country's love affair with violence. And the fact that that is what we go to whenever we feel like we've been disrespected or we feel like we need to solve a problem. Yeah, I think it's a lot. I've always thought that it's a lot deeper than weapons, but we absolutely do not need assault weapons on the streets.
Well, what I was getting at, what you campaigned on, was to get at street crime and violence. We need to fight poverty.
Exactly.
And, the underlying causes that, cause, particularly on urban streets, for people to pick up the gun to solve petty problems, comes out of frustration and lack of opportunity, hopelessness, and,
our glorification of violence in the country.
That's right. So Nick from Highland Park, New Jersey. How can we get more working class people to run for office on the state and local level, given the real time and monetary constraints many have? You want to go or you want me to go? Okay. You need an organization. We need a party so that when we put up people who have a job and are working, they have the support. And, part of our purpose in running is not just to raise issues and advance policies. It's to build the Green Party as a grassroots organization. And I contend that we will not be a major party and force in American politics until we have local party chapters in working class communities, communities of color, among young people, where the people, because we've gone out and listened and talked to them, we've organized, not just mobilized. We mobilize the people we already know. We got to go out and organize the people we don't know. And you don't preach to them, you listen and find out how you can help, and you build friendships and relationships and trust. So when we have a party organization in working class communities, and the people know us and trust us, and they come to us when there are issues, then we can suggest to them, hey, you're a leader in the community. You should be on city council or the county board or the state legislature. And we have an organization that can support them, because running for office is a bottomless pit. You can always do another phone call. You can always write another statement. You can stay up all night, every night, get no sleep, and wear yourself out, and it still won't be enough. You can always do more. But if you have an organization and you have a realistic plan and you carry out what you do the best you can with what you got, we can advance. And then with that support network, working people can step up. That's a big problem in our politics. You got to be retired, or you got to be a professional with so much income or make enough income by working part-time as a lawyer often, or a real estate agent, that you can take a job in public office. And that's difficult for working people. So that's what we need. We need a real party. We need a party. The Democrats and Republicans, they are memberless. They are brands. They are candidate organizations. They're like little enterprises, and they're startups, and they appeal to the rich folks, invest in us. And then by the time they get to the people, it's only vote for us. And they advertise at them. The people don't come together in a local Democratic or Republican Party organization to decide, how they're going to deal with affordable housing or whatever the issue is. So we need a party, and then working class people will have the support they need to run. What will you do for LGBT plus people? Your turn, Angela.
Welcome. You are welcome here. I don't know if this has been a part of, I think it's in my bio. I am on the LGBTQIA rainbow. I'm in the family. And one of my issues, or one of my intentions with this run, is to make it very clear to our communities that you are welcome in this party. You are not just lip service. This is somewhere that you belong, because we are watching, under cover of this pandemic, attacks on the Affordable Care Act that protect our transgender family. And there's things like that we can't tolerate that. And so when we're talking about the rights of people in the LGBTQIA community, you're talking about human rights, and you're looking at the intersections of, where being in those communities intersects with people in so many other different places too. So, I mean, when you're talking about what we're asking, what will we do for the LGBTQIA community? Everything. I mean, all of these benefits that we're talking about with this platform, that's for us, and it's the same with communities of color, which intersect with the LGBTQIA community, with the disability community, with our seniors, with our youth, with so many. I mean, they're all interrelated. And so making sure that, primarily what I'm thinking is making sure, particularly for transgender people, that the measures to protect them from discrimination at work, from discrimination in housing, that those things are not just lip service, that is codified into law, so that people understand you cannot be fired for being trans. You cannot be denied housing for being trans. You cannot be denied adequate medical care and compassionate medical care because you are trans or non-binary or lesbian, all the way across the board. So making sure that these communities are protected by law, and also that you are welcome in this party.
Yeah, I'll just add that we need to get the Equality Act across the finish line. It passed the House, stalled in the Senate. and we need a new tone coming from the White House. Trump doesn't pick out LGBTQIA folks by name, but his intolerance, the bigots and the, homophobes and the transphobes, they get the message, and they think, they got a get out of jail free card to do violence to people that are marginalized or minorities. So we need a new tone coming from the top. Colin Bolafenta, hope I pronounced that right. Howie Hawkins 2020, how do you address the issue of lifting embargoes that harm the Cuban people while also not supporting the authoritarian Cuban regime? Well, I'm going to be on a forum tomorrow night that should be posted on Facebook and campaign website, I believe, dealing with that question in the COVID epidemic. And I'm for lifting the embargo. It's been on since what now? 60 years. And it hasn't changed the authoritarian nature of Cuba. And they can use as an excuse. They're under attack and they need, special measures. So that's been counterproductive. And it's really not up to us to change the Cuban regime. It's up to the Cuban people. But I think we give them space by opening up trade and cultural exchange and, letting them, sort their own issues out.
And also looking at the fact that of the beautiful things that are actually coming out of Cuba, despite U.S. embargoes against them. They have a lot of beautiful things that this country, quite frankly, needs to emulate. A socialized healthcare system where your doctor lives in the neighborhood that you live in. They're doing big things with organic agriculture and things like preventive medicine, so you don't have this catastrophic illness that you're going to a doctor for. I love the way that they do things, and absolutely lifting the embargoes. They don't make any sense. And the self-determination of the Cuban people themselves, they know what they need better than anybody else. So their regime, as Howie said, is up to them, but absolutely removing those embargoes.
Fat Boy Bodybuilder. Can we expand programs like Job Corps for the Green New Deal jobs and on campus? We have a civilian conservation corps that is on steroids, speaking of bodybuilders. And I'm trying to remember the numbers now, but I think it's a couple trillion over the 10 years because we've got to restore habitats, including soils, as we move to organic regenerative agriculture, wetlands, mangroves, forests that will take carbon out of the atmosphere and put it back into the biosphere where it's not heating up the planet. And in terms of on campus, that's an interesting question. I think, we're talking about a full employment economy. And so there should be opportunities for people on campus to get into careers they want. And if they're related to some of these Green New Deal programs, there should be an intern or should be paid intern, summer jobs, that kind of thing. So students can get into their field, while they're doing their studies.
I'll take it.
Okay.
I'll read it. Daniel from Indianapolis. What are you doing to get the 5% soon, and when will we start to rally? I am ready to go green. You want to answer that, Howie?
Well, I'll explain what 5% means. Federal Election Commission defines minor parties as those that get between 5 and 25% of the presidential vote. If you get more than 25%, you're defined as a major party. And either way, you qualify for public funding for your general election in the next election cycle. So if we get over 5%, we'll get over $10 million for our general election campaign in 2024. And that would be more than we've ever raised. I think Ralph Nader raised the most. It was 8 million in 2000. So that would be significant. That's what 5% practically means. But I would add that there's another pot of public money, and our campaign is the only one in any party that's going to qualify for it this year. And that's the federal primary matching funds program. We got to raise $5,000 in 20 states and contributions of $250 or less per person. We're at 13 states, and we want to get to the full 20 in the next few weeks. So you can go on our website and look at it's under Mobilize tab, and it says Matching Funds Progress, and see how your state is doing. And if you're not at 100% yet, it'd be nice to make a contribution. And even if you are, your money's going to be doubled up to $250. So, that's kind of nice. So we've already qualified for that in past elections. We're doing the Green Party, Jill Stein did. We're going to do it this campaign. And the major party candidates don't want to do it because if you accept that primary matching funds, you can't spend more than $50 million on your primary. Now, that's more than enough than what we need, but the major party candidates, that's not enough for them. The other thing about that general funding, after Obama refused to take it in 2008, McCain had to because he was broke. No major party candidate has taken that general funding grant that comes after Labor Day in the general election, because they're raising, I think the amount is over 100 million, but they're raising billions. And if we don't use it, we may lose it. There's legislation in Congress to get rid of all this public funding. So, that's an issue. And 5% is, that'd be nice. In Germany, you get 5%, you get into the Bundestag. And we could use that to say we should have representation in Congress, like every other rational country that has proportional representation. There's a lot of things we could do if we get 5%. I don't know if you want to add to that, Angela.
Nope. You said it perfectly.
Okay. Well, that's it for the questions tonight. We've been going about an hour, and we try to keep it an hour. So, we got another question.
We got one more.
Okay. You want to read this one?
I absolutely do. Monotone Oric. What are some of the best ways to organize locally for the Green Party? It's a dope question. Talk to people. Ask them about what it is they believe in. Present the party platform to them. Ask them, go over it with them. Is this something you can sign on to? Is this something you would want to be a part of? Is this something you would want to be a member of? Be honest about it. Have honest discussions with people. What do they want? Arthur Ashe said it a long time ago. You start up, what did he say? Do what you can with what you have where you are. And so if you're interested in organizing locally for the party, start with the people you know. Talk to them. Have honest conversations about things that, ask them what they want and go from there. It's like, presenting the party platform to them. Is this something you could be a part of? Is this something you would want to be a member of? I mean, for me, it's just very direct. When I was an organizer, I didn't dance around things with people. And I know y'all can't tell from the way I've been long-winded tonight. It's been a long day. But just get into, asking people, what is it that you need? What is the most pressing thing happening with you right now? What is the thing that is burning in your chest that you absolutely need to see? What do you need to get off your chest? And work from there. People know what they want, and they don't want to be told what to want or chastised for feeling like they need what they need. So just start with the folks in your immediate orbit where you are with what you have and go from there and just see, what's happening with that.
Yeah, I would say get involved as Greens in movements, struggles that are already going on in your community. So people know who you are and that you're reliable, and build relationships. And then as you go through activities, keep names, collect lists, actually go out. If you have a table, don't sit behind it. We're not doing tables right now, but I see too many people, they're tabling and they're reading their phone and people are walking by. You got to get out in front of the table, hand people a piece of literature and try to engage in a conversation. And if you get them, get their name and contact information. And then don't just sit on the name, have regular communication with them so they know that you care. And so I think, those are just some elementary things about organizing. And then finally, I would say, as you bring new people in, don't bring them to business meetings. People come to the Greens because they want to take action and they want to learn. So you should have reading groups, study groups, and you should use them to help people develop their thinking, because we're talking about something, their ability to speak, have different people present about the reading to start the discussion off. And, everybody should take turns at different tasks that you do in organizing, whether it's writing or laying out graphics, share the skills, and, get a lot of people who have the skills. And also cultural events, just where people can, get to know each other without the pressure of having to make decisions or having some heavy political discussion. And that builds, what we call in the military unit cohesion. But, people liked each other's company. You want that. And so those are just some advices. And the other thing I would say is, don't wait for central headquarters to tell you what to do. And that includes our campaign. And one of the interesting things about Bernie's campaign in 2015 and 16 was they were overwhelmed. They weren't prepared for all the people that came in. But the people who wouldn't wait for the campaign, they went out and organized. They did their stuff on Facebook, social media, in the community. They just went at it. So, we have suggestions for you, but don't wait for us if, we're getting jammed up in terms of people coming in. Take the initiative. And so those are some of my thoughts on that. So that's the last question our campaign managers are going to let us read tonight. And I know Angela got to get up early to drive that truck. So I think it's time to end. And I really appreciate people listening. And thank you, Angela, for coming on. She was going to read the whole substitute until I straightened out my calendar. So
I'm glad you made it.
Yeah, well,
Andrea would have had to do the heavy lifting. So I'm glad you made it.
Okay. So that's it for tonight. And we've been doing this every Tuesday. I imagine we'll do it next Tuesday. Got to check with the boss, the campaign manager, but we'll be online. And if you have more questions, we're happy to keep answering them. So have a good evening and thanks for being here.
Bye, y'all.